If you had heard a cut of that show before it ever got heard publicly, you probably would have said, no, the data reflects that this is like too dirty, or, women don't want to hear other women talk this way. Yeah, whatever. Insert line here.
We're not afforded that same luxury. We don't have millions of dollars waiting in our coffers to throw at market research. We just don't have it. The means are not afforded to us. And so we're left with, and this is part of the beauty of the American economy and capitalism, other avenues through which we can develop our success and become upstarts. And those are typically your disruptive shows that appeal to passion, that appeal to human interest, to ethics. That's how you gain new audience, new appeal.
Yeah.
At least from what I can see.
Yeah, like everyone was so shocked by like Call Her Daddy coming out. Yeah. That I really don't believe would have ever been started as a show by a major corporate outlet. And you say, well,
Picked up by Barstool.
Barstool picked it up when it was done. Barstool would start it. And Barstool's like, they are technically corporate now, but they pretty much build their entire world on reminding themselves that corporate sucks and like, we're not going to do that. So some cynics will say, well, there's still an aspect of it. Sure.
Of course.
But the personalities there and the fact that they're constantly publicly facing, that helps against that. But what I was going to say is like, some people may say, well, Howard Stern's been the biggest show on Sirius for a long time. You remember when Howard Stern took over radio? What that was like? They're like, this will never go. This will never, and he took it by storm, so much so that when Sirius came to buy him, he was already the biggest thing. So of course they bought him, just like anyone, if they could, would buy Call Her Daddy right now.
As a data-driven decision.
Yeah. Yes.
One of maintenance,
yes.
Not one of emergence.
Yes, exactly. And so people see these things rise, and it's hindsight is 2020. They're like, oh, I see why that works now. Oh yeah, the data supports that, all these females want to talk about, men and how much they suck and also like their sex lives and stuff, and then men are going to want to listen to it too, so it'll have a 50-50 audience. Of course every corporate says that now, looking to Call Her Daddy, but like,
well, now you have data to reflect on that backs it up.
Exactly. Because now they're like, oh, we have the data point, but they don't look at it that way. They're like, oh no, we would have known this all along because the data would have told us. No, it wouldn't have. If you had heard a cut of that show before it ever got heard publicly, you probably would have said, no, the data reflects that this is like too dirty, or, women don't want to hear other women talk this way. Yeah, whatever. Insert line here. And then it became one of the biggest podcasts in the world because they did it bootstrap and they did it their way.
And so that brings up an interesting point of you find yourself wondering, how do you manage the conflicting priorities between being first to market and having an original idea and mitigating your risk of flop? And the real answer is the most successful shows have a very high flop chance.
Huge. You don't hear about the flops.
Of course you don't. They flopped.
Yeah.
But you find that throughout the industries. Who takes on the most risk in finance? Venture capitalists.
Yeah.
Who strikes it the biggest? Venture capitalists. Mm-hmm. They're putting their own coffers in with no guarantee of return, and sometimes it's gone. Sometimes they strike it big.
Yeah.
Same thing happens in athletics. You got a guy who's on course to make the NFL, tears his meniscus and his MCL, career is shot. Huge flop potential. You'll never hear the names.
Greg Oden versus Kevin Durant.
Yes, sir.
There isn't, especially where the NBA was then, maybe today you would say differently just because of how the game progressed, especially through the Warriors and stuff like that, and where it's at right now with the type of game. But in the 2007 draft, if you did not take Greg Oden overall, there was something wrong with your scout department.
Right. He
had no history of knee problems. He was a 7'1" or 7'2" player with a crazy vertical who could dribble, he had some of the best post moves coming out of college of all time. He was a passer. He was the best defensive player on the floor immediately, all these things. And you had Kevin Durant, who was also a freak, an amazing scorer from Texas. But, you could get, there's more even though he was an outlier in his height and stuff, he was very thin and slight, and there's a higher chance that you're going to have really good scorers come into a draft in the future.
Yep.
The chances of you getting a Greg Oden were, once every 15, 20 years maybe for a guy that size. So of course Portland took him, but it's still a chance. And so then when Oden tears his meniscus right away as a rookie and then never gets his knee to recover and just repeatedly gets injured, and Kevin Durant becomes one of the 15 greatest players to ever play the game, hey, too bad. It was the risk.
That's the way it goes.
And it's inherent in anything, and that's why a lot of great things don't happen, because people don't want to take that risk. They don't want to do. People don't want to even take the shot of running the opposite way that everyone else is. Why do you think people lose their ass when the stock market goes down? Because they sell, because they get scared, when in reality they should be getting more aggressive. And
That's
maybe
when you double down.
Right. Maybe it's like my background and I'm like, what's the word? I'm like morbidly excited about that stuff. When the stock market's going down, I'm like, let's fucking go, baby. Yeah, keep going.
Your
keep
time to
going
shine.
down.
Your time to
because I'll
shine.
just throw in money every day. Like, oh, it's down another 10% today. Boom, again. Like, that's how I'm trained. Most people, and that's just because of where I worked and stuff. Most people, they don't think like that.